We live in a culture that glorifies verbal affirmation. We're taught that love must be spoken to be real, that if someone hasn't said, I love you, they must not feel it. But that belief, while emotionally satisfying on the surface, ignores one of the most ancient primal truths about human bonding. Protection is a biological declaration of attachment, and more often than not, it occurs without a single word being spoken. When someone truly loves you, before they've even named it, they begin to move around you in subtle ways. They become instinctively attuned to your safety. This isn't some romantic gesture from a movie. This is evolutionary wiring. The human brain is designed to detect threat and prioritize survival. But when we deeply care for someone, their survival becomes part of our own. Their distress triggers our concern. Their discomfort becomes something we instinctively try to relieve. And here's where the depth lies. This isn't always conscious. It's reactive. That's what makes it so profound. Watch how they place themselves when you walk through a crowd. Notice the quiet way they check the street before you cross. Listen to how their tone shifts when someone disrespects you. These aren't grand declarations. These are primal, nonverbal cues encoded with care and fueled by emotional priority. And it's not just physical protection, it's emotional as well. The person who's in love with you might not say it outright, but they'll guard your reputation in rooms you're not in. They'll defend your perspective even when you're not around to justify yourself. They'll protect your dignity. And they'll do it quietly without needing recognition. This instinct to shield isn't a tactic. It's not about winning affection or gaining favor. It's an internal shift where the person they care for becomes part of them. In the same way your hand reacts before you even process pain, someone in love reacts to your vulnerability like it's their own. And that's the thing. Love isn't always poetic. It's not always beautifully phrased. Sometimes it's reactive, and often it's silent. So if you're wondering whether someone loves you, look less at what they say and more at what they instinctively do. Because when a person begins to protect you as they would protect themselves, they're not just showing affection, they're revealing the deepest unspoken architecture of love. If there's one thing that reveals love before it's confessed, it's attention. Not just surface level interest, but a precise and almost reverent noticing of you, your moods, your shifts, your needs. In psychological terms, this is called attunement, and it's one of the rarest yet most accurate signals of deep emotional investment. You see, people don't give attention freely. We're all overloaded, flooded with information, distracted by devices, caught in our own spirals of anxiety and busyness. So when someone gives you their undivided attention consistently and without prompting, that's not random. It's a form of prioritization, and in many cases, it's love in disguise. What does that attention look like? It's subtle. It's in the way they remember small details you forgot you mentioned. It's the way they pick up on the fact that you're quieter than usual, not because you told them, but because they noticed. They're reading you, not just reacting to your words. This kind of presence isn't driven by obligation. It comes from a deeper emotional drive, a psychological reorientation where your well-being becomes meaningful to them. You matter. And not in some abstract, sentimental way, but in a lived, tangible, perceptible way. Now, here's the fascinating part. That level of attention mirrors what psychologists refer to as secure attachment. It reflects a state in which the other person's emotional system has registered you as significant, not temporarily, but fundamentally. In other words, they're not just looking at you, they're watching over you. That's not infatuation. That's rooted care. You don't get that kind of attunement from someone who's half in. You get it from someone whose emotions are already anchored. And yet most people miss this. We look for grand romantic gestures, sweeping declarations, dramatic confessions. But the real proof is found in whether they're paying attention when no one else is. Do they anticipate your needs? Do they adjust when you're off balance? Are they curious about your experience even when it's not convenient for them? This kind of noticing, persistent, gentle, unspoken, is love stripped of performance. It's love operating at the level of perception and presence, not just language. Another behavior that quietly reveals love, perhaps more than any declaration ever could, is sacrifice. Not the kind that seeks recognition, but the subtle willingness to forgo comfort, convenience, or even ego in service of another's well-being. This kind of behavior often flies under the radar because true sacrifice, like true love, is rarely theatrical. It's practical. It's invisible until you look closely. When someone begins to reorganize parts of their life, their time, their habits, their plans, not because they're told to, but because they want to, that's significant. It suggests that their psychological structure is adapting around your presence. And that's not trivial. That's a transformation. You see, in the realm of psychology, we often measure the strength of attachment, not just by how people feel, but by what they're willing to trade. Love isn't just about pleasure. It's about cost. What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to endure? The answers to those questions tell you far more than any sweet words ever could. It's easy to speak of love in a vacuum. It's much harder to quietly sacrifice something of value for someone else, especially when no one is watching. This kind of sacrifice also challenges the self. It forces us to tame our impulsivity, to confront our own selfishness, to delay gratification, all in favor of someone else's good. That's not weakness. That's discipline. That's maturity. And in many ways, that's what love ultimately demands. It's also deeply spiritual. When you choose someone else's need over your own convenience, you're essentially stepping outside of the ego, aligning with something higher, a transcendent value that places connection above control. This is why love and sacrifice are always intertwined. You can't have one without the other, not in any enduring sense. If someone consistently chooses what's harder, the longer drive, the patient reply, the uncomfortable conversation, for your sake, then understand they're telling you something, not with words, but with behavior. Love shows itself not in how loudly someone proclaims their affection, but in how quietly they endure discomfort for your peace. That's the paradox. The more invisible the sacrifice, the deeper its meaning. Another deeply telling sign that someone is in love without saying a word is attentiveness to your emotional state. And I don't mean reactive attention, the kind you might get from someone who notices you're upset only after you're visibly breaking down. I mean the proactive, preemptive form of emotional awareness that emerges when a person becomes invested in your inner world as if it were their own. Think about what it requires psychologically to really tune in to another human being. It demands presence. It requires the suspension of your own ego, your own preoccupations, long enough to notice the subtle inflection in someone's tone, the micro expression that flickers across their face for half a second, the drop in energy that no one else seems to catch. This isn't casual empathy. This is the kind of presence that reflects true relational depth. Because when someone loves you, they begin to map your emotional territory the way a cartographer maps a coastline, carefully, patiently, and with genuine curiosity. It's in the way they sense your tension in a crowded room, or the way they text you, not because they have something to say, but because they felt something shift in you. Love makes people hyper-aware, not obsessively, but intuitively. And that intuitive awareness stems from one essential truth. Your emotional experience matters to them, not as a means to an end, but as an end in itself. Philosophically, this is profound because to truly notice someone is to honor their existence. It's to acknowledge that their experience of reality has intrinsic worth, that it's not just background noise to your own story. That level of care is sacred. It's relational reverence. And again, it doesn't shout, it listens. People often underestimate how rare and powerful it is to be seen in this way. In a world saturated with noise, fast answers, and shallow exchanges, someone who pauses to feel with you without needing to fix or explain is giving you something precious, their conscious attention. And attention is the currency of love. So if someone consistently notices when your mood changes, when your smile is a little forced, or when your silence isn't peace but wait, understand that's not accidental. That's emotional investment, expressed not in flowery speeches, but in micro moments of attunement. Another one of these silent but unmistakable expressions of love is sacrifice without scoreboard. When someone willingly gives up their comfort, time, or resources not to be praised, not to gain leverage, but simply because they care, that speaks volumes. It's a gesture that doesn't need explanation because it communicates the oldest language of love. I'm willing to endure discomfort if it means easing your burden. This isn't martyrdom. It's not about self-erasure or constantly bending over backward to please someone. No, it's a conscious, voluntary act of giving that emerges from a sense of responsibility, not obligation. There's a huge psychological distinction between those two. Obligation is transactional. It carries resentment. Responsibility, in this context, is chosen. It's the result of valuing someone enough that their well-being starts to matter as deeply as your own. That's love, not duty. Think about how rare that is. We live in a culture that teaches us to protect our autonomy, to guard our time, to avoid doing too much for someone unless it's reciprocated. But love isn't always reciprocal in the moment. Sometimes it's asymmetrical. And that's okay when it comes from a place of strength rather than desperation. A person in love will miss sleep to make sure you're okay. They'll drive across town just to be there. They'll rearrange their day, not because they have to, but because something in them wants to show up for you. That desire to show up quietly, consistently, and without fanfare is the real test of devotion. And here's where the philosophical depth lies. When someone makes those sacrifices, not for attention or applause, but because your happiness is theirs, they're embodying a deeply moral principle. They're recognizing your value, not as a means to their own gratification, but as an end in itself. That's Kantian ethics, rooted in love, treating another as an end in themselves. Most people miss this because they're looking for grand gestures or poetic confessions. But love doesn't always sound like a speech. It often looks like someone carrying the heavy grocery bag so your hands stay warm, or taking the late night call when they're exhausted because they'd rather lose sleep than let you cry alone. These things aren't small, they're monumental. They just don't advertise themselves. One of the most profound yet overlooked signs that someone is truly in love is emotional attunement. This isn't about being agreeable or overly affectionate. It's about being present in a way that reflects deep awareness of another's inner world. Emotional attunement is when a person consistently picks up on your unspoken moods, responds to subtle shifts in your energy, and aligns their behavior accordingly. Not to control, not to manipulate, but to connect. There's something deeply psychological happening here. When someone tunes into you like that, they're signaling you matter, not just what you say or do, but what you feel and need, even if you don't say it aloud. That kind of presence requires vulnerability and discipline. You have to be paying attention. You have to care enough to notice. And that's where the love is. It's in the noticing. Now, in a world filled with noise and distraction, this is rare. Most people are busy projecting, not perceiving. They're wrapped up in their own storylines, filtering others through their own emotional needs. But the person who loves you will pause. They'll momentarily let go of their own agenda to really see you. That's powerful. That's sacred. It's not reactive. It's responsive. That's a distinction people often miss. There's also a biological layer to this. Neuroscience shows us that emotional attunement is a cornerstone of secure attachment. When someone feels felt, their brain calms, their nervous system regulates. That's not poetic exaggeration. It's measurable. Emotional attunement creates safety. And love, real love, seeks to be a safe place for the other person. Not soft, not enabling, but reliable and understanding. And it's worth noting, attunement doesn't mean always agreeing or never challenging. In fact, love that attunes is often the love that gently confronts. It notices your self-doubt and speaks truth back into you. It hears the irritation behind your silence and invites clarity, not conflict. That requires a maturity of spirit, a willingness to engage the relationship as something other than a game to win or a need to fill. It becomes a dialogue between two sovereign individuals who recognize each other's emotional reality. So the next time someone picks up on your unspoken tension or soothes your anxiety without you asking, or simply stays quiet when that's exactly what you need, that's not accidental. That's attunement. That's someone loving you out loud without speaking a word.